Well, good morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome. This is Valley Beth Shalom Torah study for a Shabbos morning. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein, joining you from beautiful Encino, California, joined by my teacher and friend, Rabbi Marc Gellman, joining us from South Florida. Marc, good morning, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos, everyone. Good Shabbos.
We are in the middle of deepest, darkest Deuteronomy.
Yep.
Moses speaking to his people in his last year of life, desperately trying to get them to recognize their role in the creation of a holy people and a sacred community. And the Torah begins today with something kind of shocking. Over and over again, the metaphor is Shema Yisrael. Listen, Jews. Listen, Jews. Listen, Jews. The Torah portion changes the metaphor this morning, and it's Re'eh. Look, he says, see. Open your eyes and see. You've been given a choice. And this is a remarkably Jewish idea, that our character is our choice, our morality is our choice. God, who has created a universe about us and put us into this position, now turns to us and says, now it's yours. You have to decide how you're going to live. You have to decide what kind of society you'll create. You ultimately have to decide what your character is going to be. And you can already begin to hear the adumbrations, the whispering of the high holidays coming upon us in about 5 weeks, because the high holidays are based on this idea that we are the sum of our choices and that our choices can change. We can do tshuva along the way. And along with the many laws in this Torah portion, laws about sacrifice, where sacrifice will take place, laws about the false prophet, laws about how we treat each other economically. Here we have another iteration of the dietary laws. The dietary laws, which say that all of this is symbolized in the way that you will eat, because eating is the most elemental relationship with the world of nature. And what you eat, I mean, Feuerbach was right. You are what you eat. The values that you will hold reflect and are reflected by your dietary practices and by your consumptive practices, the way that you touch the material world. You can have all these beliefs, but the way you touch the material world is critical for the way that you carry yourself in life. And among them is one of these strange laws, and I know this interests you, Marc, has to do with blood. When we kill an animal, we are told that you may eat the carcass of the animal if it's a kosher animal, and if it's killed in the kosher way, but you first have to pour out the blood. I remember when I was a little kid watching my grandmother used to kosher chicken, right? Thursday
in
night.
a wooden bowl.
Well, she had the top of a crate with sort of slats in it. She'd lay out the chicken and then salt the hell out of it with kosher salt and soak it. This was the Thursday night ritual so that we could have chicken on the table Friday night. And I used to say, Bubby, like, what are you doing? He said, well, we have to kosher it. And kosher meant take the blood out of the animal. Talk to me about blood, Marc. Why is the Torah obsessed with blood?
It began with me in the same way. My interest in this, as it did with you, is watching my grandma salt stuff in a wooden bowl, and it was only later that I realized glatt kosher is salt. It means salted kosher. It means meat that the salt is used to desiccate the meat, to pull out any little bit of blood that there might be in it. And it's all about the Jewish relationship to blood. So I want to say a few things about that. The first is, there's two different kinds of religions in the world. There's religions that identify members by belief, and there's religions that identify people by blood. So the first thing about blood is that it's used to identify members of a religion. But for example, the belief religions, the two big ones, are Islam and Christianity. You don't have to be born a certain race or a caste or anything. You just say the Shahada in Islam and you're a Muslim. I mean, you have to believe it, that Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. That's the Shahada. It's like their Shema. And in Christianity, you believe that Jesus is the Son of God who died for your sins, and you're a Christian. There are, however, religions in the world that define identity by blood and blood alone, meaning who your mother was, how you were born. And that's most of the Native American tribes and Aboriginal tribes, and also Hinduism, which has a system called the Varnas, which determine where you sit in the society based on your blood, based on how you were born. Alone among all the religions in the world, and people don't realize this, there's only one religion, only one in the history of all humanity that has tried to mesh blood and belief, and that is Judaism. We believe you're Jewish by blood. Your mother started out as your father, but then it became 1,000 years ago, it became your mother. And your blood is your blood, and you're Jewish by your birth. Nothing you can do about it. But the other part of it is we also accept converts. So you can convert to Judaism by saying, I believe. We never, unfortunately, said, what do you have to believe? And what is the list do you have to believe? But so we have this strange combination. And it always fascinated me. And then I went back and I looked at the story of blood in the Torah. It begins with Adam, whose name means red. Now we think it's red earth, but it isn't red earth. It's blood. It starts out that our belief, for example, that all people are made in the image of God, is directly proven by blood. The only thing that all people in the world share, the only thing, is blood. We all have blood. We all have really the same blood, different DNA, but the same blood. And that unity of blood is exactly paralleled and undergirds and supports and exemplifies our belief that all people are made equally in the image of God. Then we have Cain kills Abel, and the response is, the bloods of your brother are crying out to me from the ground, the blood. And then we have Joseph's coat, which is dipped in blood. And then we have blood on the doorposts of the house in Egypt at the Exodus. And then when Moses is going first to Egypt, he has to circumcise his son Gershon. Actually, Zipporah does it and says, Chatam Damim, you're my bridegroom of blood to me. And it's interesting that in the bris is the only time in all of Jewish rituals, all of them, where you have to have blood. Any other Jewish ritual, you have blood, it violates and destroys the sanctity of the ritual. But in a bris, you have to draw tipat dam, a drop of blood, even in someone who's already circumcised. Then you have, in the Talmud, no sacrifices and blood rituals, and no blood allowed in meat, and all of that is elaborated. And then we move into the modern period, and we realize that blood is the life, that this isn't a metaphor. This is an actual truth. It's the truth of our life, which Watson and Crick figured out. The blood is the life, the DNA in the blood. And not only in blood, but it comes through the blood. And that is how we have a unity of identity. We also, in the crime of murder is the highest crime because it takes away a sanctified life. What is it called? What is it called?
Shofech damim.
Exactly.
The spilling of blood.
Spilling of blood. So spilling of blood is the way, and not all murders are spillings of blood, but that's what it's called. Mm-hmm. And then, so the point of all this is that human sanctity is not an acquisition for Judaism. Human sanctity is an attribute. It's something we all possess. And that for no reason other tthan life itself is holy. And this is the distinction between us and the Greeks. You know how big a fan I am of Aristotle? Well, in this, he was dead wrong. He thought you had no identity and no dignity unless you had raised yourself up above the vegetative level and above the animal level, and unless you could be a rational thinker. And that's why he had no problem putting disabled children and people of limited mental capacity out on the hillsides around Athens to be eaten by the wild animals. He also believed that women and non-Greeks didn't have the same capacity for rational thought. He was wrong. If he had just said teenagers don't have the capacity for rational thought, I would have agreed with him completely. But the point of Aristotle is that he thought human dignity was an acquisition. You had to achieve it by proving that you were rational. And some of our issues in medical ethics have now come down to that. Well, do you have a right to live if you're a vegetable, so-called? If you can't think, if you can't talk? What are your rights if that is? And I want to conclude with a poem that fully explores the notion of blood and the feelings about blood from the Holocaust by the great Holocaust poet Paul Celan. It's one of his great poems called Tenebrae. And in translation, here it is. We are near, Lord, near and at hand. Handed already, Lord, clawed and clawing, as though the body of each of us were your body, Lord. Pray, Lord, pray to us, we are near. Wind awry, we went there. We went there to bend over hollow and ditch. To be watered, we went there, Lord. It was blood. It was what you shed, Lord. It gleamed. It cast your image into our eyes, Lord. Our eyes and our mouths are open and empty, Lord. We have drunk, Lord, the blood and the image that was in the blood, Lord. Pray, Lord, we are near. That's one angry man.
Yeah. So I love the thesis that the emphasis on blood emphasizes that there's an inherent sanctity to every human being that can't be compromised by any social status or by productivity or any of the other kinds of ways that we measure human beings, that there's a fundamental sanctity to human life and human existence.
Exactamento.
Let me move it just a little bit differently. I want to continue with this idea. The Torah portion begins with this idea of belief, right? Re'eh, I put before you this great choice. And I put before you the choice of being loyal to the God of your ancestors or of going astray, which is a moral choice. It's a choice of faith, a choice of loyalty. And then all of the laws that follow from that opening overture in this Torah portion are very, what you call in Hebrew, gashmiut. You know, they're very physical. They're very material. It's as if to say, you know, in certain faiths, you have a division between spirituality and materiality, and that somehow materiality is a compromise of spirituality. And you'll see this when people get very upset, for example, when a Jewish community talks about material realities as if it were a compromise, it was a stain on spirituality. But here, The Torah portion is talking about what you eat. The Torah portion is talking about how you spend your money. The Torah portion is talking about how you deal with the slave, how you deal with the poor, how you deal with people who are in trouble. It's very gashmiut. It's very, very, it's bloody. It's very real, very, very physical. And the feeling you get from the Torah portion is this idea that, yeah, belief is powerful, but the moral choice between belief or disbelief, loyalty or disloyalty, is made in the realm of real stuff. It's made in the realm of real stuff. I mean, to say that I'm a believer, and then to spend your money in a manner which is totally immoral, right? To say I'm a believer and treat human beings in a way which is totally callous is simply wrong. Each of the expressions of this spirituality come down to the way that you live in the material world. So that Judaism is a faith of deep belief, no question, but it's as well a faith of a way of living in a material world where that choice is made again and again and again and again. So somebody asked,
could we say, Eddie, it's embodied belief?
It's embodied belief, it's incarnate belief, it's embodied belief, it's embedded in the daily patterns of life. I mean, when you mess with the way somebody eats, when you impose a symbolic moral system on the way that they eat, you are imposing a spiritual overlay on the most physical activity that we do. Animals do it, animals are eating and we're eating. Everything that's alive is consuming. And you're saying, I want to impose a spiritual moral overlay on the way that you consume nature, the way that you touch the material world, so that the pattern of your life in the material world now becomes a metaphor for your deepest spiritual convictions.
Yep.
And
Beautiful.
That's what's interesting about the Torah portion. And then it takes up the question of money. Now, for Marc, and the funny thing, Marc, is is that one of the words for money in the Talmud is damim, which means blood.
Yes.
Right? So let's
That's
take a
very
moment.
good. I missed that.
Yep. Talk to me about money.
Well,
and Jews and money,
this is
and
the parsha
Jewish life and money,
There's a phrase that I heard in yeshiva. You probably heard it too. Someone will go up to another bocher and say, "Do you meiser yourself?" He said, "I meiser myself. Do you meiser yourself?" And the term meiser, to meiser yourself, means that you give away 10% of your gross income before any deductions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from this parsha with the notion of the tithe. And from it, I learned you can't just have a Judaism that has cheap belief, which is what you were just talking about. Oh, I say I believe this and this, but I don't act like that. We need to return to a sacrificial Judaism. I've spoken with many times with you on this in this setting, because I've been focusing in the last 5 years in my high holiday sermons on the Klei Kodesh, the objects in the temple in Jerusalem. And I'm very happy that the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. I'll say it straight up, because I don't want to have animal sacrifice hanging around right now. I don't think it's a good look, as they say in the advertising world. But there is something about the biblical Judaism that I deeply regret that we have lost when the temple was destroyed. And that is the notion of sacrificial Judaism. That Judaism requires that you sacrifice for it, not just that you say, yeah, I feel Jewish, but what does that mean? And that's all about, I've set before you a choice, life and death, choose life, and which comes later. And I believe that's the key to this, that we need to return to the notion of giving to God. giving to God, making our Judaism sacrificial. And when you say you miser yourself, this is simple. If you're listening to this is simple. Add up how much you gave away this year before you talk to your accountant and see if it comes up to the 10% mark. And this is what is so wonderful about being Jewish, one of the many wonderful things. The rabbis had to actually limit some of the Baalei Tzedakah, some of the really philanthropic poor Jews of Europe. They had to limit them not to give away more than a third of their income. Now just think of that. Think about the fact that we are the heirs to Jews who had to be ordered by their rabbis not to give too much, because they could give away so much they couldn't support their family. So the idea is you have to give at least 10% and not more than a third. And ask yourself, is that what you do? Or could you move closer to it this year? And if you want to move closer to it, you know, VBS is a very good source of
God
taking
bless
care.
you.
And I have no product placement issues here.
Yeah,
I don't get a piece of any of this. So the fact is, supporting the synagogue, supporting Rabbi Feinstein, supporting our work, supporting what we do and what we are as Jews is part of the choice that God has set before us. Make the choice. Make a good choice.
But let's push this one more step.
Okay.
The theology.
You want me to take names? Write down names?
That would be nice. The theology, the philosophical attitude that underlines that ethic, that's underneath that ethic, is something which is very radical and in some ways very countercultural. And that is that the stuff that we say we own, we don't own.
Correct.
Right? God owns everything. I mean, the idea is that the stuff
that
everything is it's a gift to us, it's leased to us, it's been given to us to share during our lifetime. But fundamentally, the American liberal with a capital L idea that my property is me, that I am my property and my property is me and it's mine and I can do with it as I like, and I open my hand only when my heart moves me to do so, is not a Jewish idea. The idea is that we've been given these things, this material prosperity. We've been given material goods to survive in the world, to prosper in the world, but it's been given as a gift. It's given with graciousness, and graciousness is expected back, or rather it's leased to us, and there are strings attached on the lease, and one of them is that we're expected to share it. One of the best examples of this in the Talmud Brachot is they're dealing with all the different blessings we say when we eat stuff. And in the middle of the discussion, they stop, they say, why are you saying a blessing? Like, I have an apple in my hand. So I say, Baruch atah Omer borei pri ha'etz. Blessed is God, creator of the fruit of the tree. They're like, why do I have to bless God? And the answer is because you don't own that apple. And you don't own that tree. And you don't own the soil that it's planted in or the rain that nurtured that tree. All of that belongs to God. Now, God has allowed you to have some to take, but taking it without saying thank you, without a blessing, is stealing. It's stealing. And so the blessing is asking permission. When we say the word please, the real phrase is something is by your will, by your will, if you please, that we let me have some. By saying the blessing, you are appropriating what is God's with a gracious act of acknowledgement that I don't own this. Now, doing that over and over again teaches an ideal that the material prosperity that I enjoy in the world is not mine. Right? Last week's Torah portion has a beautiful idea. It says, don't think that when you move into this land and you prosper in the land, you're going to say, by the power of my own arm, I earned all of this. Well, yeah, you did, but there's an awful lot of contingency there. And the attitude is that this was given to you as a gracious gift, and graciousness is expected back from you. It's been put in your hands to be used, but you don't really own it. And it's part of it is there to be shared with those who need it more than you. And that whole attitude is very countercultural.
Totally. You
And
know, one of my favorite parts of that, I don't even remember. This is one of those things, Eddie, where you know it, but you don't know where you learned it. Where someone gives a tzedakah gift, you're not allowed to say thank you for the gift, which we would say because we are Greeks at heart, and we think they didn't have any obligation to give it, but they gave it out of the goodness of their heart, which you brilliantly and beautifully said. That's not Jewish. Jewish is you have an obligation to share what isn't yours to begin with. But when someone gives a gift of tzedakah, Jewishly, you can't say thank you. What you have to say to them is mazel tov. Mazel tov is congratulations that you were able to do the mitzvah of tzedakah.
Right.
What a gewaldic word. What a amazing point of view. That, yeah, I'm happy that you gave it. I'm happy to be the recipient, but I'm more happy that you had the chance to do a mitzvah here, which you're obligated to do when you choose the right path.
Wow. So, it's a beautiful, beautiful story. The rabbi's telling one of his congregants about his teacher, the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim was a great teacher in Europe. And the story is that he had an open house. Whoever in the neighborhood needed a place for Shabbos could sleep at his house, could eat at his table. And the story is that some stranger comes, and the stranger comes and he stays in the house over Shabbos. And on Saturday night, as everyone is leaving the house, Shabbos is over, the Rebbe notices that the silver candlesticks are gone. And somebody comes and says, Rebbe, the stranger is stealing your silver candlesticks. He's running down the street with your silver candlesticks. And the Rebbe goes outside and he says, Hefker, 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 which means I don't own them anymore. They're yours. In order to absolve him of the sin of stealing. And the rabbi tells his friend this story, and this friend says, oh, come on. You really believe that about the rabbi? And the rabbi says, about your teacher? And the rabbi responds and says, I don't know if it's true, but I know this. You think anyone's ever going to tell a story like that about you or me?
I mean, beautiful.
Again, you cultivate a certain quality of personality that has a certain attitude about material wealth. It's not, by the way, let's make this very clear. Nowhere in the Torah are you condemned in any way for the acquisition of material wealth.
Right.
There's no sense of a rich guy gets into heaven like a camel goes through the eye of a needle, which is in the New Testament story. You're not condemned for being wealthy, for being well off, for having material wealth, for having material comfort. I like to sit at a Shabbos table and enjoy a good wine and a good meal and my friends around me and the comforts of being in a home. That's perfectly legitimate as long as it comes with this attitude that gracious generosity is expected of you, along with your enjoying of the comforts of life. That's the metaphor here, of recognizing that all of this has been given to me as a gift. And that's an extension of your idea of damim, of blood, right? That this is a faith that is deeply invested in the life we live in the real world, the material world, and not simply the life that we live in some ethereal, mystical sensibility.
Yeah.
Who's the most generous? Yeah, go ahead.
I buried a woman, and I'm asking her family about her. She was an immigrant, and she came from a little shtiebel in Eastern Europe. And they told me a story that took my breath away. They said a grandma, her mother, every Shabbos, to make cholent for Shabbos, you couldn't light a fire. So what they did, the women would bring pots of beans, and if they had money for meat, and potatoes, and they put them in the oven of the baker, because the baker would let the oven die down, but it was still hot for a long time.
Right.
And they would cook at a low temperature.
The whole community, everybody in the community brought their Shabbos meals to the bakery, because the oven never got cold. It stayed hot all Shabbos. Right.
Every single Shabbos of her life, she brought 2 cholent pots to the baker. One for her family, and one for a poor family whose name she never knew. And the poor woman, would take the cholent pot and feed her family, clean it out, return it to the bakers, and she would pick it up and fill it up again on the next Shabbos for this woman. Her whole life, she did this. Yeah. This is embedded ethics.
Yeah, and and I'll give you the modern take on that was, my parents owned a bakery.
Yeah.
And, at the end of a bakery day, you have to get rid of the merchandise that didn't sell because it's not fresh and it has to be refreshed in the morning. There was a group of guys in the neighborhood, wonderful guys. They were the Bagel Brigade. And every night they'd come to the shop, and every night my mother would pack a huge box for them, and the box would go to the homeless shelters, the box would go to the community charities, the box would go to the Head Start programs, because it was all good stuff. It just couldn't be sold in the shop. And I watched this, and there was this conspiracy by my mother and these guys that every night all of this stuff went out to the community. And it was never written down on an accounting. You'll never find it on the books. The IRS never knew about this. This was just, and I said to my mother once, why are you doing this? And she looked at me like I was out of my mind, because that's what we do.
Right.
That's who we are.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's a good way to end. Marc, thank you for learning with me today. Take good care.
Thanks.
I wish your computer were refuah shlema.
I don't know what this is.
We'll figure it out.
I think it's your end. It's your
probably.
fault,
and we want to wish everybody a very good Shabbos and take good care.
Good Shabbos, everyone.